The cold didn't just sting, it accused. I stood under a buzzing streetlight outside a county shelter, clutching a grocery bag that still smelled like oranges and pine cleaner, while my son's taillights shrank into the dark like they'd never belonged to me. My fingers kept patting the same coat pocket, not for warmth, for proof that I still had something that was mine. Inside, a volunteer slid a clipboard toward me without pity, just routine. I signed my name so carefully it looked like someone else wrote it. A Christmas song drifted in from somewhere far off, soft enough to feel like a joke. I lay on a metal cot and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the stains, telling myself I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't break, I wouldn't call. But when my hand found that small folded slip of paper in my pocket again, my throat tightened, because I realized if the numbers on that slip matched what I'd hear in the morning, I wouldn't need revenge. The truth would do it for me. I used to believe a paid-off house meant you were safe in old age. For 37 years, I ran a small HVAC business outside Dayton, Ohio, furnaces in winter, air conditioners in July, crawl spaces that smelled like wet insulation. I didn't mind the work. Work made sense. Bills got paid. Kids stayed fed. After my wife, Marlene, passed, the house got too quiet. My son, Eric, told me, "Come stay with us, Dad. We'll take care of you." He said it the way people say, "God bless you," after you sneeze automatic, clean, untested. I packed light. A duffel bag, my old leather wallet, a framed photo of Marlene that still held a dust line where it used to sit on my mantel. At Eric's place, I tried not to be in the way. I rinsed my coffee cup. I folded blankets. I took short steps so the floors wouldn't creak late at night. But I noticed the small things. The way his wife, Dana, spoke about me as if I were a chore on a calendar. The way the grandkids learned to ask for things without saying please, because they'd watched their parents do the same. Still, I told myself, it's adjustment, it's grief, it'll settle. I didn't realize the settling would be me lower and lower until there was nowhere left to stand. The first warning wasn't shouted, it was served with a smile and a locked drawer. Dana started organizing the home. My mail disappeared from the kitchen counter. My checkbook vanished from the side table where I always kept it. "One of the kids might get into it," she said, sweet as syrup. Then she moved my medications. Not far, just far enough that I had to ask. "Dad, you've been forgetting things," Eric told me, rubbing his forehead like I was the headache. "Let Dana handle it." I wasn't forgetting. I was being managed. One afternoon I overheard them in the hallway. Their voices were low, but the house carried sound the way it carried heat. "He signed the deed," Dana whispered. "It's in our name. We just need him. Settled." Eric exhaled. "After the holidays." That was the phrase that stayed with me after the holidays, like I was a decoration they could box up and store in the garage. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and ran my thumb over the grain of the wood I'd refinished myself years ago. My hands were still steady. My mind was still sharp. But I'd learned something in the trades. If someone keeps saying the furnace is fine, it's usually because they don't want to pay to fix what's broken. I went to bed early. Not because I was tired, because I didn't want to hear what they'd say when they thought I was asleep. In my coat pocket, I felt a folded receipt from a gas station. I didn't know why I kept it. Habit, maybe. Proof, maybe. At the time, it meant nothing. By Christmas Eve, it would feel like a key. Christmas Eve arrived with lights on the house and darkness in their eyes. Eric insisted we ride together to see a service. He helped me into the back seat like I was fragile glass. Dana handed me my old coat. The zipper stuck halfway, and she didn't offer to fix it, just watched me struggle. Snow fell in lazy flakes, and the neighborhood looked like a postcard. I kept thinking of Marlene hanging ornaments, humming off-key, making the house feel alive. Eric didn't talk much. His hands stayed tight on the wheel. Dana scrolled her phone, the blue glow making her face look colder than the weather. I tried to keep it light. "The kids excited?" "Yeah," Eric said, quick. "They're excited." The car turned away from downtown, then away from the church roads, then onto a strip of old brick buildings and dim storefronts. When we stopped, the sign out front wasn't a sanctuary. It was County Warming Center in block letters. I laughed once, because surely this was a mistake you could laugh through. "What is this?" I asked. Eric stared straight ahead. Dana's nails tapped her phone screen like a metronome. "We can't do this anymore," Eric said. You're too much, Dad." I waited for the punchline, for the part where he said, "Just kidding." But he opened the trunk and set my duffel on the curb. Then he pointed at the door like you point at a trash can. My breath turned to fog. My heart didn't break loud. It broke quietly like a hairline crack spreading through glass. The car door slammed, and my entire life felt like it slammed with it. I stepped out slowly, knees stiff from the cold duffel strap biting into my palm. The wind cut right through my jacket, as if it had been waiting for me. Eric didn't meet my eyes. Dana didn't even pretend to be sad. "Dad," Eric said, voice tight, "they'll take care of you here." I stood there long enough to give him a chance to change his mind, long enough to imagine Marlene's face if she saw this, long enough to feel the humiliation crawl up my throat. Then the brake lights flared, the tires hissed on slush, and they were gone, leaving behind nothing but exhaust and silence. Inside the warming center, the smell hit me first. Bleach, old soup, damp wool. A volunteer with tired eyes slid a clipboard toward me. "Name?" she asked. Not unkind, just practiced. My hands shook as I wrote. The pen felt too light for the weight of what I was signing my name on a line that said I belonged nowhere else tonight. A man in a knit cap pointed me toward a cot against the wall. A thin blanket sat folded at the foot like an apology that didn't mean much. I sat down and stared at my shoes. They were scuffed, but they'd walked me through decades of work. Now they were parked in a shelter like they'd failed at their job. I reached into my coat pocket without thinking and felt that folded slip again. Paper. Nothing. And yet my fingers curled around it like it could keep me alive. Shame has a temperature, and it's colder than snow. Morning came with fluorescent lights and watery oatmeal served on paper plates. People lined up with heads down, each carrying their own private wreckage. I tried to blend in. I did what men do when they've lost everything. I made myself smaller. Across the room, an older woman stared at a creased photo like she was trying to climb back into it. A man muttered to himself about a daughter who forgot his birthday 3 years in a row. I wasn't special here. That hit harder than the hunger. After breakfast, I stood by a window and watched families in cars pass by gifts on back seats, kids waving at nothing. I pictured Eric's living room, the tree, the fireplace, the couch where I used to sit at the edge to avoid taking up space. I imagined them telling the kids, "Grandpa's staying somewhere, he'll be fine." People like that always polish the lie so it looks like mercy. A volunteer came by with donated coats. She held one up, 2 sizes too big, and asked, "Will this help?" I wanted to say, "A home would help." Instead, I nodded and took it. When I put it on, it swallowed my shoulders, but it was warm, and warmth from a stranger felt like something I didn't deserve anymore. Back at the cot, I stared at the ceiling tiles again. Then my hand found that folded paper in my pocket. I unfolded it slightly. Numbers, printed clean. I didn't know why my pulse quickened like my body sensed an exit my mind couldn't see yet. I'd spent my life fixing other people's heat until I couldn't find any for myself. That afternoon, the shelter announced everyone had to leave for a few hours while they cleaned. I walked outside into the gray, my breath hanging in the air. The town felt closed, stores shuttered, streets quiet. Christmas had locked its doors. I limped to a bus stop bench and sat. My knees throbbed in protest, and a dull pressure pressed behind my ribs, not sharp, just heavy, like a hand that wouldn't let go. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of dying and nobody noticing. A young couple walked past carrying a pie, laughing. The sound didn't make me angry. It made me invisible. I thought about all the things I'd paid for. Braces, college books, Eric's first used car, roof repairs on the house that was now legally his. I had built a life like a wall, brick by brick, thinking it would protect me later. But walls don't protect you from the people you hand the keys to. Back at the shelter, I sat near an old TV mounted in the corner. It played holiday news on low volume. A banner scrolled about local events, charity drives, season of giving. I almost laughed. My hand went to my pocket again. That folded paper was still there, creased from my fingers. A gas station. A quick pick, a habit I'd kept because it gave me one small moment of possibility. I'd forgotten about it until the night Eric left me. Now I stared at it like it was a message meant for someone else. Hope is dangerous when you're starving for it. Early Christmas morning, the shelter was quiet in a way that felt sacred and sad. Most people slept in their clothes. Someone coughed in the corner. A heater clicked, then fell silent like it gave up. I sat at a plastic table under flickering lights. The TV buzzed with static, then settled on the morning news, smiling anchors, cheerful voices. Miracles happen. Miracles, I thought, happen to people who are seen. I unfolded the ticket. The numbers stared back: 0, 3, 11, 18, 26, 41, 47. I whispered them once, like a man testing if prayer still worked. Then the lottery segment began. The anchor read the numbers slowly like she was reading names at a graduation. 0, 3, 11, 18. My breath caught. 26. My fingers went numb. 41. I leaned closer. The plastic chair squeaked loudly in the quiet room. 47. For a second, I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just held the ticket in the air between them like it might shatter. I checked once, twice, 3 times. Every number matched. The anchor said the jackpot, $5 million. A man behind me whispered, "You okay?" I couldn't answer. Not because I was happy, because my body didn't know what to do with the idea that fate had reached into my pocket and flipped my life over. Tears came without permission. Not tears of celebration. Tears of being reminded I was still alive. I didn't scream, I just sat down like the floor had disappeared under me. The shelter staff called the lottery office while I stared at the ticket as if it might evaporate. They walked me through the steps. Keep it safe. Don't sign it in public. Come in for verification. People clapped. A few smiled like they were watching a sunrise after a long storm. And that was when it hit me strangers were happy for me in a way my own son never had been. A volunteer pressed a warm cup of coffee into my hands. It tasted burnt, but it steadied me. "You're a Christmas miracle," someone said. I wanted to correct him. "No," I almost said. "I'm a warning." By the time we reached the lottery office, cameras were already there. Word moves fast when the story is clean. Abandoned father, shelter cot, sudden jackpot. A reporter asked, "How do you feel?" I didn't talk about luck. I said, "I feel awake." That was the truth. They tried to hand me a blazer for the photo. I refused. I stayed in the oversized donated coat, my old shoes with worn soles. Not to prove I was humble, but because I wanted the world to see what Eric decided was disposable. When the giant check came out for the cameras, flashbulbs popped like fireworks. I held it with both hands, shoulders squared, face calm. I could almost picture Eric's living room TV glowing. I could almost hear Dana sucking in a breath. And for the first time since Marlene died, I felt something close to power, quiet, controlled, undeniable. The first call came before I even reached the hotel. The lottery office arranged a modest room for me downtown, nothing fancy, just clean sheets and a lock that belonged to me. In the elevator, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Then another. Then another. When I stepped into my room, the TV was already on in the lobby downstairs, and I could hear my own name echoing faintly from the hallway. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet pattern like it held instructions. The phone buzzed again, this time Eric. His name on the screen looked unreal, like it belonged to another life. I let it ring. A minute later, Dana called, then the kids. Over and over, like they thought persistence could rewrite what they'd done. Voicemails piled up. At first they sounded soft. "Dad, please, we were worried. We didn't mean..." Then came the shift, the part I recognized from old arguments. Explanations that sounded like blame. "You know we were stressed. You know you've been difficult." I listened to none of it all the way through, because the truth didn't need their narration anymore. It had cameras. That afternoon, the news ran a live shot from my old street. I watched from my hotel room. There was my house, my porch light, my driveway, my mailbox. And there they were behind the curtains, faces pale, still as statues. The neighborhood knew, their coworkers knew, their church friends knew. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd been caught, and the catching wasn't my doing. It was theirs. If you understand quiet strength, you belong here. Public judgment doesn't yell, it isolates. By the next morning, camera vans lined the curb near my old house like they owned the street. Neighbors stood in small clusters with coffee cups, watching, shaking their heads. A reporter interviewed a woman from across the road. She didn't mince words. "That man built that house," she said, "and they dumped him like garbage." I turned the volume down, but I could still read the truth on her face. Eric tried to step outside once. The moment he opened the door, microphones tilted toward him like a flock of birds sensing food. He raised his hands and said it was a misunderstanding. But the word didn't fit. A misunderstanding doesn't drive away while your father stands in the snow. His boss was mentioned on a local segment, something about company values. By noon, Eric was sent home. Not fired, not officially, just quietly removed. Dana posted a long message online. I didn't see it directly. Someone from the lottery office mentioned it. "They're trying to control the narrative," he said. The narrative was already done. Because America loves a clean moral line, an elder abandoned, a miracle revealed, and the guilty scrambling. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. Eric's voice, rawer than I'd ever heard. "Dad, they're outside our house. The kids are scared." For 1 second, something in my chest softened. Then I remembered the shelter clipboard, the cot, the way he didn't look at me. I didn't call back, not to punish him, to keep myself from becoming the tool that fixed his mess again. When people can't control you with guilt, they try anger. Day 3, the voicemails changed flavor. The pleading got sharper around the edges. Eric said, "Dad, this money, it's family money. We all sacrificed." I stared at the wall after that line, waiting for the laugh that never came. Sacrificed. He meant my years, my back, my wife's absence at the dinner table because we were always working. He meant the deed I signed over because I trusted him. And now he wanted the prize as if it had been sitting in his palm the whole time. Dana left a message that sounded rehearsed. "We can come to an agreement. Let's keep this private." Private? The word tasted like bleach. Because privacy had protected them when they tossed me out. Privacy would protect them again if I let it. That night, I took a walk near the riverfront by the hotel. The air was sharp, but my coat was warm. Cars passed, their headlights gliding over wet pavement. I thought about Marlene. She used to say, "A man's dignity is the one thing nobody can take unless he hands it over." I'd handed mine over for years, hoping love would be returned. But love that's transactional isn't love. Back in my room, I wrote down 3 things on the hotel notepad. Lawyer. New address. Shelter donation quiet. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning distance. And somehow, distance felt like the first honest thing I'd done in a long time. The internet doesn't forget, and shame doesn't expire. Within a week, Eric's name was no longer protected. People online connected dots the way they always do, fast, ruthless, certain. His workplace reviews flooded with comments. His church got calls. Dana's social pages went dark, but screenshots lived on like fossils. I didn't read most of it. I didn't need to. I could hear the consequences in Eric's voicemails. Sleep gone, appetite gone, pride gone. "They're filming us at the grocery store," he said once. "The kids are getting stared at." Another message, "Dad, just tell them you forgive us, please." He wanted me to be the mop for his spill. But forgiveness on command isn't forgiveness. It's control in softer clothes. Meanwhile, the lottery office assigned me a security consultant for a few days. A calm man named Curtis. He didn't talk much, but he watched doors like they were questions. He said, "People will come out of the woodwork, some with love, most with needs." I told him, "I'm used to being needed." He glanced at me, "Not like this." That night, I sat by the window and watched snow start again, thin and steady. In the reflection, my face looked older than it had at the shelter, but calmer. I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires hope that the other person will change. What I felt was clarity. And clarity is what scares people who built their lives on you staying confused. Losing money hurts, losing respect changes your posture. By early spring, I heard through Curtis that Eric was working part time at a hardware store across town. Nothing wrong with honest work. The difference was he used to look down on men behind counters. Now he was one of them and people recognized him. Dana took a cleaning job at night. Their SUV disappeared from the driveway, then the patio furniture, then the second TV. They listed the house. My house. The one I'd insulated myself, rewired myself, patched and painted with my own hands. The realtor's photos showed the living room staged like a magazine. But you can't stage out guilt. The comments online called it the abandonment house. Cursed. Offers didn't come. Not for a while. A neighbor left a sign on their fence that said shame. I didn't ask anyone to do that. I didn't even know if it was true. But I knew the feeling of a community turning its back because I'd lived it in reverse. I made a decision that day. I would not move back into that house even if I could. Some places hold too much of your old begging. Instead, I bought a small place on Lake Erie, clean, quiet, modest. A porch facing water that moved steady and honest. No grand statement, no press release. Just a key that turned in my own hand. I sent one letter to the shelter director with a cashier's check for heating costs. No name, no cameras. He called to thank me anyway. I told him, keep it warm for the ones who still think nobody sees them. Peace isn't loud, so people mistake it for weakness. Summer brought tourists to the lake and quiet mornings to my porch. I learned to drink coffee slowly again, to watch waves instead of ceiling tiles. Still, my phone would buzz now and then new numbers, old relatives, distant cousins who suddenly remembered my birthday. I didn't answer. Curtis helped me set up a trust and a foundation, small, local, practical, ramps for seniors, utility bills, emergency motel nights for families with nowhere to go. He asked if I wanted my name on it. I said no. Let it do what it does, quietly. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter with shaky pen strokes. It was from an older man at the shelter. He wrote about the first warm night he'd had in weeks, about sleeping without his coat on. I read it twice. Then I sat very still, because it hit me this wasn't about proving Eric wrong. This was about rebuilding the piece of myself that had been treated like a burden. In late September, an envelope arrived without a return address. Inside was a photograph, Eric and Dana at a bus stop, heads down, groceries in plastic bags. No note, just the image. A stranger's version of consequences. I set the photo in a drawer and closed it. Not because I was hiding it, because I didn't want my new life decorated with their downfall. Some of you know that weight, the strange guilt of watching someone suffer from what they chose. That's when I understood my revenge was already finished. All that was left was what kind of man I'd be after it. The knock on my door sounded like pride swallowing itself. It was late October when Curtis called. "He's in town," he said. "Your son." I didn't ask how he knew. Curtis always knew. That evening, as the sky turned the color of steel, someone knocked 2 soft taps, then a pause, then one more like he was asking permission to exist. I opened the door. Eric stood there thinner, shoulders rounded, eyes avoiding mine the way they did at the shelter. His jacket was too light for the lake wind. "Dad," he said, voice cracked. I didn't invite him in. I didn't slam the door. I just stood in the doorway like a line he couldn't cross without truth. "I lost the house," he blurted. "We lost everything." "Not everything," I thought. "You still have your breath. You still have your children." I didn't say it. He swallowed. "People look at us like we're monsters." I waited, because the thing he still hadn't said was the only thing that mattered. Finally, his eyes lifted, wet. "I left you there. I did, and I can't undo it." There it was. No misunderstanding. No excuses. Just the truth. He stepped forward like he expected a hug. I held up my hand. Not angry, steady. "I'm not here to fix you," I said. "I spent my whole life fixing what you broke and calling it love." His face folded. "What do you want me to do?" I looked past him at the dark water. "Live with it," I said quietly. And let it change you. Or don't. He stood there a moment longer, then nodded, smaller than I'd ever seen him. When he walked away, I closed the door gently. My hands were calm. That's how I knew I was free. Some people apologized to heal, others apologized to negotiate. 2 weeks after Eric's visit, Dana tried. She didn't knock. She stood at the end of my driveway like she was afraid the ground might reject her. She called out my name once, sharp and rehearsed. I walked onto the porch, keeping distance. I came to talk like adults, she said. We can move forward. Forward, I thought, is where you wanted me out of sight. She launched into practicalities. Therapy for the kids, a fresh start, maybe a family meeting. She spoke the way salespeople speak when they want you to forget the last product was defective. Then she said it. We're struggling. The foundation you set up, you could help us quietly. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could do for them. I told her, the money I give now goes to people who didn't abandon me, people who didn't need cameras to remember my humanity. Her face tightened. So you're punishing us? I shook my head. No, I'm choosing. She stepped closer. You owe your grandchildren? I owe them an example, I cut in. That cruelty has consequences. For a moment, her mask slipped. You're enjoying this. That line finally made me feel something sharp, because enjoying it would make me like them. I said, I'm not enjoying anything. I'm resting. Dana stared like she didn't understand rest without leverage. Then she turned and walked back to her car, shoulders stiff with humiliation. As her taillights faded, I realized something else. They weren't haunted by my silence. They were haunted by the fact that I could live without them. The calendar turned, and the air began to smell like the night they left me. December returned with early sunsets and grocery stores playing the same songs Marlene used to hum. In town, I heard people still bring up that Christmas shelter story as if it belonged to folklore, a cautionary tale, a headline that never fully died. I kept my life simple. I volunteered at a senior center twice a week. I fixed a neighbor's broken furnace without charging. Old habits die gentle. One evening, the shelter director invited me to a small dinner, no cameras, just folding chairs and warm stew. I sat among men and women whose faces carried quiet battles. A man across from me said, My kids stopped calling when I couldn't babysit anymore. A woman nodded like she'd heard the same sentence in her own life. That's a familiar silence. I didn't give a speech. I didn't announce checks. I just listened. Later, as I stepped outside, the director squeezed my shoulder. You gave this place dignity, he said. I looked at the building brick, plain, honest. It gave me shelter when I was erased, I replied. On the drive home, I passed a living room window glowing with a Christmas tree. For a second, my chest tightened, not longing memory. Marlene's laughter, the smell of cinnamon, the way I used to believe family was a contract signed in blood. Now I knew. Family is a choice you renew daily with kindness. At home, I hung one simple wreath, and I slept without the ceiling tiles counting me back. Subscribe, power moves quietly. On Christmas Eve, the world gets louder unless you've learned to live in quiet. That night, snow started again, just like before. I made a small dinner roast chicken, canned green beans, a slice of pie from a local bakery. Simple, warm, enough. I set Marlene's photo near the candle and sat for a while without forcing anything. My phone buzzed once. Eric. No flood of calls this time, no desperation, just one ring, then silence. A minute later, a text arrived. I'm sorry, I'm still sorry, I'm trying. I stared at it a long time. Part of me wanted to reply with something clean and final. Another part knew that some wounds don't close with words. They close with years of different choices. So, I didn't respond. Not because I was cruel, because I was careful with what my attention fed. Outside, the lake wind pushed snow against the windows. Inside, the heater hummed steady, something I'd fixed myself when I first moved in. I thought about the ticket that changed everything. How close I came to tossing it. How close I came to being a man who vanished. And I realized the real miracle wasn't the money. It was the moment I stopped asking for love from people who only gave it when it benefited them. Some of you know that weight, the relief that arrives when you stop begging to be chosen. Before bed, I wrote a small note to myself. Keep building places where the forgotten can be warm. Then I turned off the lights, and for the first time, Christmas Eve didn't feel like a verdict. It felt like a quiet door closing behind me. Healing isn't a finale, it's what you do when nobody is keeping score. Over the next year, I kept the foundation small and practical. No galas, no speeches, just quiet fixes that kept people warm. A power bill paid before shutoff, a motel room for a mother and her boy, a ramp built before the first freeze. I went back to the shelter once a month, not as a headline, but as a man who remembered the smell of bleach and soup. I'd sit at the plastic tables and listen. That's where the truth lives, between burnt coffee and tired eyes. One morning a man asked, "How'd you keep going?" I said, "I didn't feel strong. I just refused to disappear." Curtis mentioned my son had moved again. Different town, different address. I didn't ask for details. Consequences don't need my supervision. Time does that work. My peace wasn't built on his suffering. It was built on my boundaries, finally holding and staying held. The cleanest justice is the kind that lets you walk away without turning into them. If your chest tightened listening to this, you may recognize that feeling the quiet weight of being valued only when you're useful. Here's what I learned. Love that has conditions isn't love. It's a contract. I never went back to that old house. I didn't argue on TV. I didn't chase a perfect ending. I built a smaller life by the water, where silence feels safe instead of humiliating. Every December, I hang one wreath and donate to shelters, because I remember what it's like to be processed like paperwork. Do I forgive my son? I don't carry hate. Hate keeps you chained. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean money. It doesn't mean pretending that night didn't happen. Tell me where you're listening from. Drop your city below. And if you understand quiet strength, you belong here.